how do we measure growth? How do we measure change? How do we measure transformation? And then even further than that, what do we do with it once we feel it, once we have it, and once we know it? Welcome back to the Happiness Happens podcast. I'm so thrilled for you to meet my guest today. His name is Schenck, and he is an absolute incredible human being. Also happens to be one of my incredible mentors. I'm actually in his mastermind program. It's called Skeleton Key. We met through podcasting, through the podcasting world, and we instantly realized we had so many different synergies and honestly so much to talk about. We hopped on a 30-minute call for literally, it was supposed to be 30 minutes. And we ended up talking for almost an hour and a half about all of the different things under the sun. It was very clear to me in that moment that Justin was someone that I wanted to be around, and I couldn't be more thrilled to be in his Skeleton Key Mastermind and in his space all the time. So having that said, our conversation today focuses on growth. And I will add this. He has published more than 500 podcast episodes on his podcast, okay? And I managed to ask him a question that kind of stumped him for a little bit. So that said, I think that you are in for a treat with our conversation, and I know you're going to love him just as much as I do, and you're going to gain so much value, so much knowledge, and so much wisdom from our time together. If you love what you hear, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode from us, and leave us a review, 5 stars, if you want to tell us how you're enjoying the podcast content. Okay. I will tell you a little bit about Justin really quick before we get into it. He's an entrepreneur, a speaker, and he's the host of the top-rated podcast called The Growth Now Movement. He's been named a top 8 podcaster to follow by Inc. Mag, featured in Thrive Global, and chosen as an icon of influence in the new media space. His podcast has grown to become a podcast that currently gets played in over 100 countries every single week, and he has gone on to help countless people grow their brands and business with his company, podbrand.io. He also runs one of the most successful masterminds I've ever been in, one of the most incredible communities I've ever been a part of, called Skeleton Key. So be sure to check that out. All right, let's get into our conversation today. I cannot wait for you to meet Justin. Justin, welcome to the Happiness Happens podcast. I'm so excited to have you here, one of my favorite people, and I know we're going to have a great conversation today.
Yeah, Simona, thank you for having me. I'm excited. I was just kind of waiting around being like, when's she going to invite me on? Like, I hope that she invites me on. Maybe I'm just not a happy person. I don't know. But I'm excited to have this conversation for sure.
I'm still waiting for the invite for your show as well. So I think it may have gotten lost in the mail since I'm in Canada. So, goes both ways.
It's the exchange rate that we were talking about earlier. It just disappeared. You're coming on the show. We just got to figure out when.
Oh, I'm so excited. I can't wait. I'm so excited. But in the meantime, you are here, and I'm grateful to have you here. I'm grateful for your friendship in my life and all of the guidance that you've given to myself, to all the people that we are in touch with, if you will, and all that you're going to share on the podcast today. I want to ask you a question. This is the only question that I have planned for you today. So hopefully you have a good answer so I can pull some things out of it. I'm just kidding. And it's a question that I ask all of my guests when they come on the show. And it is, what does happiness mean to you?
It's a great question. And happiness is a funny word, right? Because my whole entire life, I was never told I could be anything but happy. But the truth is, I did not discover real happiness until I remember I was going through some things, and I had a relationship coach in my life. And I was going through some things with a girl I was dating at the time. And me and my coach were talking on the phone, and she's like, well, how does that make you feel? And I go, well, it makes me feel angry. And her response is, great, you're allowed to be angry, but you just can't be an asshole. And this amazing thing happened to me because it was the first time in my life I was given permission to be anything but happy. And so happiness for me is being okay with wherever I am in life and enjoying the process, whether that means, hey, I'm angry right now, let me feel these feelings. Hey, I'm sad right now, let me feel these feelings. I had a moment yesterday. It was the 8-year anniversary of my mom passing, and there was a moment of sadness, but I still felt happiness in that moment because I can find gratitude in that moment and all those things in between. So for me, happiness is something that is constantly in flow, but it's just understanding that I'm okay with who I am in this very moment, no matter what is happening around me.
I think that is a great answer, and not one that anyone has ever shared on the podcast before. So I think that's really great. And I want to ask you from there, if someone's listening to this right now and is like, okay, like that's great and all, and like I know I need to get to that spot, how do you even begin to start putting the pieces together to give yourself the permission to A, feel a feeling, B, do something different, or C, to even just exist in that moment of gratitude for yourself every day?
Yeah, I think the realization is when you look at your life now, and if you don't allow yourself to feel the feelings, if you don't allow yourself to be okay with the moment, how good is your life around you, right? Like, I think that you have to look at how your past actions have gotten you to the place that you're at right now. That's the first thing. And then 9 times out of 10, if somebody's not dealing with their emotions in the right way or dealing with their moments in the right way, they're going to go, I don't like my life. Okay, great. Then you have to do something different. So
Mm-hmm.
what are you going to do different? And so you have to disrupt your comfort level in order to create change, right? So that first moment of, hey, when you're sad, don't turn to alcohol, don't turn to drugs, don't turn to sex, don't turn to the thing that you're addicted to. Sit and feel your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great place to start, to understand that you're not going to allow those addictions to pull you away. And it doesn't mean you're addicted just because you grab the bottle, but what it does mean is that you're using it as a coping mechanism. So a good place to start is to sit and feel your feelings. And I'll kind of give my life as an example. So I mentioned in passing, my mom died yesterday, 8 years ago. So she battled opioids for 20 years. And when she passed away, so number one, she was my favorite person on the planet. Whether she had demons or not, she was incredible. She was my biggest cheerleader. So when she passed, I was very, very upset. And so I actually ended up being blackout drunk 6 nights a week for about 3 months. And I realized that I was numbing the pain. I was running from my feelings. And I had a coach at the time helping me through some spiritual things. And she was like, she called me one day out of the blue and she goes, what are you doing tonight? And I go, well, I'm going out with some friends. And she goes, no, you're going to sit and you're going to feel this. And so I was kind of forced in a sense to sit and feel the feelings. And it was really, really difficult. It was a really difficult evening to be in my emotions and to feel it. But when I woke up the next day, there was this great weight lifted off of my shoulders and a lot of clarity around my mom's passing. And I realized that in that moment, because I felt my feelings, I felt a lot better. And so that was kind of the permission for me. And so I would say to somebody listening right now who's afraid to sit in their feelings or who's running from something or just not happy in the moment, sit and feel it. Allow it to be. And then you can take the action to fix everything around it.
Mm-hmm. What's the difference for you in between sitting and feeling the feeling and then letting that become, the next night and the next night and the next night? Because I think there's this like misconception, if you will, especially in the healing space. I do a lot of like different work in the healing space, right? And I think there's a misconception around all of that, if you start your healing journey, you always have to be on this healing journey. And it's like this never ending loop of things that happens. And then all of a sudden, your whole identity is like this person who is just constantly in a state of healing, which is fine. But I think there's also seasons to that too. And so it's like, yeah. So what do you think in terms of length of time? I know it's like feel it for as long as you can, but then what?
Yeah, I would say, don't even feel it as long as you can. You figure out before you get into these sessions of feeling it, how long am I giving myself? Am I giving myself 5 minutes? Am I giving myself 5 hours? Am I giving myself 5 days? And then you have to take action because you can't stay in that place, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it over and over and over again where people have destroyed their life being stuck in that place. My mom was stuck in that place, right? She was an addict for 20 years because she was stuck in the idea that she felt worthless. Right. Instead of taking the action to do something better. It's so funny you bring up the spiritual healing journey and all the things. Like, I believe there's a difference between healing and growing. Right. So like, I believe that we should constantly be growing, but we don't always need to be healing. Like, we need to do the work that we need to, whether it be with a therapist, a coach, or whoever, to get past those brief moments in time, but to understand that everything is happening for me and not to me. You have to get out of that victim mindset and begin to grow as a human being. And when you make the decision for yourself to grow versus just constantly bring up and rehash the things you've been through, that's when you begin to make a change in your life and the life of people around you. Just not being stagnant. But at the end of the day, just like, I'm a bruiser at heart, right? So like, stop being a wimp. Like, you need to take action right now, because otherwise you're just going to be miserable for the rest of your life. And do you want to be? Like, the answer is going to be no. I would hope, right?
I hope so.
And so that's when you begin to be able to step forward. But I believe to have that upfront contract with yourself to say, I'm giving myself 5 minutes or however long to feel this. And everything has its different moments, right? You lose a client, give yourself 5 minutes, be like, oh, this sucks. But you lose a loved one, you might take a little bit more time.
Totally, 100%. And, you know, you and I have had so many conversations offline about so many different things. And I think that one thing for my own self in my own life that's been really present is obviously, you know, getting separated and then eventually getting a divorce. Not really something that I've like overly talked about. So if you're hearing this on the podcast, like congratulations, because you and like 5 other people know. No, I'm just kidding. That said, I feel often a lot of guilt, always feeling guilty. But it's not even feeling guilty for like anything that I quote unquote did. It's more so the guilt of, you know, taking something away out of somebody else's life that they were not planning or anticipating. And so it's like on one part of my mind, I'm like, okay, I can absolutely, you know, take the situation. And when I really zoom out and think about it, I'm like, no, everything is okay because it's always okay. You know, like everything is fine. But then when I let myself start to spiral in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, I, I'm a terrible person. I can't believe I did this thing. And like, what, like, you know, and it's not even like a thing. Like, I really don't want to phrase it like that. Like, I didn't do a thing. The thing was asking for a separation because I'm the one that left. Okay. That was the thing. And that's not a typical thing. So, anyways, I digress. But all to say, I just feel like it can be a little bit hard for someone like myself, I think, who feels things very deeply to just cut it off. It's hard for me to cut off that feeling.
Yeah, I think the real conversation is where is your self-love and your values for yourself. It's
Okay.
not necessarily like, oh, I'm
We're
so
done
worried
here,
about
Justin. No, I'm just kidding.
it's like it's not the whole like, you know, I'm worried about somebody else's feelings. Or I'm so sad that I've hurt somebody else's feelings. I will say this. I was on a self-love journey for many years. After my mom passed, I had two realizations. The first one was she didn't die because she was an addict. She died because she didn't love herself. And the second thing was I realized I didn't love myself. And I had to figure out that journey of how do I really begin to love myself? Now that I love myself, I understand that some of my decisions in order to serve me and make sure that my life is happy and my life is headed in the right direction will hurt other people's feelings. And that's okay because I'm number one, including my wife, including her kids, including my family. I'm number one because I can't give to somebody else if I'm not taking care of myself. If I'm miserable in the relationship that I'm in, if I'm miserable in the job that I'm in, if I'm miserable with my life, I can't be of service to anybody. So what good am I? So I need to make sure that I take care of me first. And sometimes it is a drastic thing of getting separated because people aren't growing together, right? They're growing apart. Sometimes it is the drastic decision to leave a job when you don't have a backup plan. But the end of the day, you have to take care of yourself first. You have to figure out how to love yourself first. And that looks different for everybody, which is why it's a really hard conversation to have. Yeah. But the reality is, like, once you figure out that self-love piece, it gets a lot easier to make decisions that move you forward. Sometimes the people around you go with you and sometimes they don't. And that's the unfortunate circumstance of human decision, right? Because they get to make their own choices as well. And that's just the way it goes. And so I would flip the script and say, how can I love myself more to understand that I'm pouring into my own cup, and I'm pouring into my own cup to not only take care of myself, but to take care of other people as well and to continue to pursue my purpose and my passion.
Okay, I really like that. And I want to ask you too, because a lot of the times people might look at like, okay, if you're going to put yourself first above everybody else, which I mean, I think that you are like your most important person because I'm the same way. I feel like going through all of the things that I've been through in the last year, I'm like, you know what? You really cannot do anything else in life if you're not taking care of you. I saw it happen in front of my eyes firsthand. And I was like, oh God, here we go. But then it's like a choice. You got to bring it back, right? So I will say though, how do you start to do that work within yourself without disconnecting yourself from the people who are around you? You know what I mean? So like, let's say you're working on yourself or you're doing all the things and it's creating like a disconnect with people in your life. How do you fix that?
This is a question I've never been asked before.
My goal.
Which
500
makes it a good
episodes
question.
on your podcast. Thank you.
Which makes it a really good question. But the reality is there are seasons in life, right? And sometimes your season is head down in your business, and sometimes it's head down in your relationship, and sometimes it's head down in improving yourself. If people are to disconnect during your time of healing, during your time of growth and work, maybe they aren't the right people to be there when you are coming out of that cocoon, right? That's just part of it. Now, for me, my self-love journey started small. Started with one thing, two things, three things. Now it's 4 things every single day that are non-negotiables for me to make sure I'm taking care of myself. So it's really about finding out, okay, like I believe self-love is making sure you're taking care of yourself first. That's what I believe self-love is. And so you have to figure out what that looks like, right? And so for me, I have 4 non-negotiables every single day to make sure that I'm taking care of myself. That's me loving myself. And then the rest of the time is for other people. But those non-negotiable times, that's me. Like, don't come in my space. Don't come in my bubble. Like, that's just how it goes. And again, the people that aren't there when you come out of that cocoon, when you're done the work, they weren't really meant to be. And that's sad, but it's also a beautiful thing because they get to go live their life and be happy, and you get to go live your life and be happy.
Exactly. It's totally about perspective. And I think a lot of the times we assign meaning to things without it actually even having that meaning to begin with. Like, we give something a meaning and that's not even actually what it is in reality. But right?
Well, it's like any time in your life, like you've done something that's embarrassing and you think about it for the next 15 years, but nobody else even noticed it. Like that is the human condition. Like we put purpose and meaning on everything, even though it doesn't really mean anything. Like I remember having clients early on in my business and I was so worried about losing them. Like when I would get a 1-word response in an email, I'd freak out, but it was just the way they responded, right?
That's
like
literally how I was too. I'm like, oh my God, they hate me. They're mad at me.
Yeah, look, I believe that as humans, if your intention is always good, then you shouldn't have the guilt around your decisions. But the intention has to be good. And if your intention isn't good, then maybe you need to check yourself.
That's such a good point. You know what's so interesting? I have a little story for you. So I was on Instagram a little bit ago, and she's probably listening to this podcast episode. So if you are listening, hello. But I have a friend that I was friends with in high school, and I don't really talk to a lot of friends from high school anymore. Like I really changed. I really grew like a lot, and we just lost touch, and it is what it is. Sure. And she had messaged me. So one story that I've always told myself is that when I am my full self, I'm really annoying. Okay. Like that's a story that like I'm annoying. People don't like me. People pretend to like me and then they don't actually like me. It's a story that played in my mind. So she messaged me maybe like a month or so ago and she was like, I want to apologize for something. Okay. I'm 30. I'm going to be 32. Okay. This probably happened when I was like 15. And she's like, I want to apologize for something. And I said, okay, what? And she said something along the lines of, when we were younger in high school, we went to a party and you had said something and I told you that you were so effing annoying. And I didn't even remember. I cannot remember when that happened. I have no idea when that happened. But I internalized that. I must have subconsciously internalized that and created a whole story around how annoying I am when that's not even the truth. And in that moment, I realized, hold on, I don't actually think I'm as annoying as I might think that I am. And it was crazy. It was crazy.
Yeah. And no, I'm glad you shared that story because as you may or may not know, I talk a lot about limiting beliefs when I do keynotes and talk on stages. And so I've done a lot of research in this space. And that is one of the things. Childhood is one of the places that these limiting beliefs come from. And it can be as passive as that. Like I tell a story about, Johnny walking down the mall with his mom and his mom runs into a friend from college and they get so excited. And they're like, oh my gosh. And they hug. And Johnny hides behind his mom's leg and the mom goes, oh, that's Johnny. He's just shy. Like it could be as simple as that one little blip on the radar. And now that person owns that for the rest of their life. Right. And so limiting beliefs are a funny thing. Most of the time, I'd say 75% of the time, they're not your fault. They didn't come from you. They may come from society. They may come from some traumas. They may come from childhood, whatever. But it is our job to overcome them, to rewrite that story, to break the patterns that we've done our whole life. Like my big thing forever was I'm not enough, right? I'm not enough. I'm not good enough to. I'm not good enough to be loved. I'm not good enough to build a business. I'm not good enough to speak on stages. I'm not good enough just to be, right? And that came from, nobody ever said that to me, but it came from a programming that my parents made their choices that disrupted my childhood. So therefore I wasn't enough for them to not make bad decisions and not be the best parent all the time. Right. And that's both my parents. So therefore I carried, I'm not enough over and over and over again into these relationships that I had. And I would self-sabotage and I would disrupt them. And I had to figure that out in order to live a healthier life and obviously in a healthy relationship now. But it's a scary thing because it's just constant work and there's always more than one limiting belief. But I'm glad you acknowledge that, right? Like that's the first step to be like, oh no, this is just a limiting belief. Why do I feel this way? Yeah. And then you figure out why you feel that way. And then you can begin the work. Because guess what? Just because she said that doesn't mean it's fixed. It doesn't mean that doesn't pop up in your head. You have to do the work in order to overcome those thoughts, even though they come from some stupid girl at 15 years old.
Exactly. She's also very nice, though. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Okay, if she's listening to this, she's not a stupid girl, but girls at 15 are stupid sometimes. So are boys, right?
Oh, 100%. People can be so mean. But it's interesting. When you and I first met, I was like, there's no way this, Justin actually likes me as a person. You know what I mean? I was like, like whatever. Like he, tolerates it. Like same story, like whatever. through my mind. And then over the last like year that we've known each other, I'm like, hold on. I'm like, he's actually like, he actually really cares about me. I'm like, that's kind of crazy. And I had no idea. I'm like, it's nuts. And I think it just speaks to like how we are so easily swayed by things in our life, and how we have all of these stories that are woven into our minds that either allow us to do the next thing that we want to do or hold us back from ever doing the things that we want to do. That is so crazy, because how lucky are we, Justin, that we have this awareness in our lives? You know, people ask
Yeah.
all the time, how did you do the next thing? Or like, how did you create this business? Or how did whatever, how? And sometimes I don't even have an answer, but what I'm realizing right now is like the ability to have awareness around something that I never would have anticipated would have impacted so significantly.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for me at least, it begins with curiosity. Like I'm so curious and I question everything, even things that I've understood and thought were true for my entire life. Like I just question everything. And so even from a standpoint of, say I'm feeling anxious one day, right? Which, raise your hand, we all experience anxiety. Like
Yeah.
it's just part of life sometimes. But I'm also an empath, so I can feel other people's feelings. And so when I start to become anxious, I start to get curious. Well, why do I feel this way? Is this mine or is this somebody else's? Am I carrying somebody else's energy? Because is there, check yourself. Is there anything in my life right now that I didn't check off the box, or I didn't do the thing I was supposed to? Is there actually anything I should be anxious about? So we start there. And then from there, okay, oh, it is me. Well, why is it me and it's not from somebody else? Okay. Oh, shoot, I forgot to do this one thing. Or, oh, hey, I didn't do the things I promised to myself that I would do, right? And so then you really kind of begin to break down those things quickly just by being curious. And that's the same thing around limiting beliefs. Like, where is this coming from, right? Like, question everything. People would consider me around certain things a conspiracy theorist, especially when it comes to governments. But the reality is, the only reason they would think that about me is just because I question everything. I question the person I voted for. I question, okay, well, why are they making this decision? But what that does for me is it gives me clarity in my next move, and it gives me clarity in how I'm going to build a business around where the economy is going. It gives me clarity on who I am and the integrity that I bring to every little thing that I do, because that's what's important to me. Am I delivering on what I said? Is my integrity in every single move, from a good standpoint, right? Like I often think about the masterminds, the Skeleton Key Mastermind. Like, am I delivering enough? What else can I do to pour into these individuals? Because number one, I like to over deliver. And number two, is the intention really, really good? And like we've talked about this before, like masterminds, they'll open the floodgates. Anybody can come in as long as they can pay.
Yeah.
And just because the person running it wants to make money. But for me, that's not the right intention for me. And so I need to make sure I'm constantly checking myself. I need to make sure that like, hey, I have a conversation tomorrow with somebody who's interested in the mastermind, which is true. But like, is he the right fit? I don't know. I have to figure that out. I'm not going to say yes just because. And so I would say curiosity and the right intention will give you clarity on the next steps that you have to take, because everybody's path is different. Like you can buy all the courses you want, but it's not going to look the same for you as it is for somebody else. Like you train people at a top level in podcasting all the time, but their paths are all different, right? Like, yes, there's a system to it, but it's going to look different for everybody.
Exactly. That is so key. And then I also want to add into there, in my opinion, because you were saying question everything, and my mind instantly went to questioning because you're doubting your decision. And I think there's a difference between questioning something and doubting yourself.
100%. Yeah. I'm glad that you said that, because it is true. I don't mean like question every little thing that you have decided to do.
I question everything,
Yeah,
but not in a good way. It's in a negative way, and it spirals your mind.
Yeah. I think to look back and at your decisions and analyze versus question. Hey, I did these things. What was the outcome? Okay, great. That may not have been the right way to do it. Next time I need to do it a little bit differently. So when you're analyzing your own moves versus questioning, I like, when I look at questioning the big decisions, or like questioning why organizations do what they do,
right?
Because I want to find out. I think at the end of the day, I want to find out their intention.
Yep.
Right. Like, and not to be controversial in any subject while we're having this conversation, but like when I mentioned government, right? Like, so when all the COVID protocols were coming down, I didn't go, oh, they're wrong, they're right. I just go, well, why are they making the decisions that they're doing? Exactly. And then how does that affect me? What are their intentions? How does that affect me? And then what decision am I going to make going forward in order to make sure I take care of me and mine? And so that's what I mean by questioning. But when you look at yourself, I would say, let's use the word analyze. I like that better.
I like analyze too. That feels way more freeing, to be honest. And also, what I will say to what you just said is there is so much judgment that I think we pass, and not even intentionally. So I think if we're able to look at things from that perspective, that you're taking your judgment out and you're analyzing facts and you're making a decision based off of things that have happened. And, I think too, especially like we'll take that time period for sure. There's only a certain amount of data, right? Like there's this amount of data, this amount of information. Great. So you make your best decision based off of what you know at that time. And then it continues to go like that. So things can always look different, and things you can change your mind because you have different information now,
Yeah. And it's funny. I judge people, and I'm not afraid to admit it. I judge people often, but I judge them from a standpoint of I want to make sure that they become better. Right? Like, you know this about me. Like, I'm not worried about being like, well, why the hell are you doing that?
Yeah.
Right? Like, but I'm doing it again. What's the intention? The intention is to make sure we get clarity on, hey, I think that there's a better way. So I'm going to question why you're doing it that way so you can figure out that there is a better way. And if not, you'll just continue down your path. It's not about judging you to demean. It's not about judging you to say that you're wrong. It's not about judging you to say I'm the best and you're a POS. It's to say, okay, what's the intention to make you better, to make life better? Because I understand you as a person, you're meant to make an impact. And that's everybody, by the way. I'm talking to you directly, Simona, but like everybody has a purpose to make an impact in some way, shape, or form. Whether that's helping people launch a podcast, whether that's helping people build a business, whether it's helping people get on stages and spread their message, whether it's helping people overcome their traumas, right? We all have a purpose. And so in order to do it the right way, you need people in your life to go, why the hell are you doing it that way? So I'll be the judger. I'm okay with that, but also understand that I'm open to people judging me and saying, hey, Justin, why are you doing that?
Exactly.
Why are you doing that the right way? Are you doing that the wrong way? So if you're somebody who's voluntarily going to quote unquote judge people, by the way, I don't judge people off of their sexualities or their anything like that. We're strictly talking off of their choices, right?
Exactly.
And so for me, I'm open to it. So if you want to be the judge, you have to be open to it as well. And I wasn't always the best at receiving. I've gotten a lot better over time. Yeah.
It's hard to receive it. It's easier to like give it. But what I will say too is by you questioning and by you quote unquote, I'll use the word judging. And I think the word judging has also like a negative connotation towards it, even though it doesn't necessarily need to, because you can judge something and not be like judgmental of it. Like I think those are two different things.
Yeah.
But when you stop and you question something else, again, like I was mentioning before with like all this data and like information, you're just giving someone else more information, right? You're giving someone else a different perspective. You're giving someone else a new sample of data to take their own, their own whatever from their own thoughts and perspectives and then shift from there. So I think that's powerful. I want to ask you, I have two more questions for you. The first one is I would love if you could share your non-negotiables with us.
Yeah, so my 4 non-negotiables every single day, they're super easy. One, I move my body in some way, shape, or form. Even if it's just a walk in the morning, it's to help me, clear the cobwebs, like get my body moving. And a lot of times I do that with my wife, which is great because we get to connect and talk. And sometimes we don't even talk and we just walk. And that's, I was going to say,
do you talk to her? Do you allow her into your walking bubble?
But for sure, sometimes there's sometimes we have to have like our morning meetings, right? Like you got to figure out what's the plan. But a lot of times it's just her and I not talking, but we're walking together and it's nice. But move my body in some way, shape, or form. Number 1.
Okay.
Number 2, I learn something new every single day, whether that's reading from a book, reading an article, listening to a podcast, whatever the case may be. I learn something new every single day because I believe what is not growing is dead. So I have to constantly improve my skill set, the things that I know, all those things. The third thing is I do a daily visualization practice where I go super, super deep and I connect my visualization to all 5 senses to make it seem real. And what that does for me, it just makes it easier to do the things I have to execute on that day. I'm not a big fan of working. Like I'm a big fan of creating income for yourself, but not, burning the candle at both ends. And so if I visualize and I feel the feelings that I'm supposed to feel in that end game moment, it's a lot easier for me to do the X's and O's today. So that's why I do a daily visualization practice. And then the fourth thing is I reach out to somebody I care about every single day just to check on them. Hey, just wanted to check in, see how you're doing. And I do that. It's funny because a lot of people think that like, that's not for you. That's for the other person. You're checking on them. But that's one of my non-negotiables, to take care of myself, because relationships, I believe, are the rocket fuel for success in your life. And so to build strong relationships, to let people know that you're there for them, it fills my cup every single day that I can be that person for them. And so I do that. And the nice part is, since I started that, I usually get a text every single day from somebody just, hey, I was thinking about you. Just wanted to let you know that you're on my mind, blah, blah, blah. Or some, I have
I love
I don't
that.
know what it is about me, but I have a lot of friends who are pastors or past pastors. So I get a lot of, hey, I prayed for you today. You popped up in my head, whatever. But
Like
it's
the nicest thing someone can do for you, though.
yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. But yeah, the especially youth pastors, man. John Beebe, Terry Weaver, so many. The
Love
youth
John Beebe.
pastor game is strong, and it's the energy I bring, I guess,
I
the
seriously.
childlike energy. But those are my non-negotiables, and I've made them my non-negotiables over time because it helps fill my cup. It makes sure that I'm recharged. It makes sure that my relationships are taken care of. It makes sure that I'm growing. And so those are my 4 non-negotiables every single day. And it's just been a beautiful thing to see how much that's shifted my life and has made my life easier.
I love that. And they're so simple to do as well. I think a lot of the times people think they got to do this big grand thing to make a huge impact in their life, meditate for 20 minutes and then go to the gym for an hour and then all these things. And it's like, okay, it's not always realistic. So making it accessible. And I just love that. My final question for you today is a question I've been asking on my podcast for the last, oh gosh, almost 4 years. And it is, what is one thing that my listener can do today, every day, starting today, to create a little bit more happiness in their life?
Yeah. That's such a hard question because I think it's a
Mhm.
different answer for every single person.
It is.
But here's what I'll say. Begin to embrace the fact that you are exactly where you want to be, or exactly where you're supposed to be, and exactly where you chose to be. So embrace the fact that you're exactly where you chose to be and exactly where you're supposed to be. Because here's the thing. One of two things happens, right? People are going to look at their life and they go, oh my God, I chose to be here. Shit, my life, I hate my life. I don't want to be here. What am I doing? This is my fault. Yes, it is your fault because the actions you took got you to this place. But the beauty of that is that means your actions today can create a better tomorrow for yourself. Happiness takes work. And so if we embrace the fact that we have complete control over our life, that means we get to choose wherever we go from here. And when you're choosing wherever you go, you design your life every single day. That is where happiness begins because you're living the life that you truly desire and not what other people want from you. And so that's what I would say. Embrace that fact and the rest will take care of itself.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me today, Justin.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is a lot of fun. You're good at this. You should teach people how to do this podcasting thing.
I've thought about it. I've thought about it a little bit here and there. I thought about starting a production company. It's been on the back of my mind.
Oh, good.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to today's episode on the Happiness Happens podcast. I hope you loved our conversation. Be sure to connect with us. All of the links are in the show notes below. And remember that happiness happens when you're least expecting it.